My name is Blair Rutherford. I'm the director of the Institute of African Studies here at Carleton University. I'm one of the co-organizers of today's event. I want to thank my co-organizers, the African Diplomatic Corps and the African Women Diplomatic Association. In particular, I want to thank Dr. Mathabo, Tsepa, Her Excellency, the High Commissioner of the Kingdom of Lesotho to Canada. Without Mathabo's work, this conference would not happen. So thank you so much for your tireless effort, and particularly because this is a very exciting topic today, looking at Agenda 2063. As many of you know, this is an effort by the African Union to come up with the vision for what Africa should look like in 50 years when it was initially produced in 2013. And it's an important document that kind of commits the African governments to improve their lives in many different spheres, but according to their own definitions, and it's a document which they want to use as a way to determine not only their own future, but to determine how they work with others, including of course us here in Canada. So I'm looking forward to the speakers here to further explore both this document and ways of moving forward, including how Canadians, both the government, and civil society, and academics could contribute to this pathway. I want to also thank the Faculty of Public Affairs. As you may have seen, this is part of what's called the FPA Research Month. FPA has been very helpful for us in providing the room and providing tons of support in making this conference happen. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce my president, Professor Roseann Runte, who's going to officially welcome you to the conference.
Bonjour, et je vais dire bonjour en français pour tous ceux qui parlent français et pour remercier les organisateurs du beau temps. Je sais, vous avez travaillé le contenu et les participants. Vous n'avez pas vraiment travaillé le climat, mais le climat nous accueille et c'est bon signe pour un excellent congrès. I really would like to welcome you all to Carleton and tell you that there couldn't be a better university for such a conference. Not just because we have extraordinary faculty and students, but because we have the only African Studies degree program in Canada, because we have one of the very few remaining women's studies program with a degree and a master's degree in Canada. We are an institution that believes in these interdisciplinary studies, supports them, has done it from the beginning, and continues to do so. The world says interdisciplinarity is the way to solve problems. You need to bring the mathematicians and the scientists and the engineers together with policymakers, with artists, with philosophers, and you will create a better world. And that's what we try and do every day at Carleton University. When you came in, you saw that beautiful sculpture at the foot of the stairs. It's a tree. The tree was dying, and the students came and said to me, we would really like to create a sculpture for the university. And I said to them, well, it's a dying tree in Old Ottawa South, and people don't want it cut down. And if it's cut down, they're going to blame the university and say, oh, you're bad people for cutting down our tree. And they said, well, what can we do? And I said, well, you have to go talk to the people. So the students did that. They went out to the community, door to door, and said to them, this tree is dying. It's a hazard. We want to turn it into something lovely. And the community said yes. And they gave us the tree. And they actually gave the students a seat on the municipal council, which shows to me the respect that they had for the ideas of our young students. And the sculpture downstairs is extraordinary because when you look at it, you might not realize it's been turned upside down. The branches point to the ground and the roots to the sky. And that's what we do at the university. We take problems, we look at them every which way, And we're not afraid to look at things in a new way, new ideas, and work together to solve them. The university has a strategic plan with 3 words: collaboration, work with other people. Problems of the world today are too big for one person to solve. They need teams of thinkers and community people working together. Leadership. Things don't get solved if people aren't strong enough to stand up, like our organizers, and say, we have to talk about this. We're going to say out loud our ideas. Maybe they're not the ones that will be accepted today, but they will be tomorrow. And the last one is resilience. Resilience is don't give up. Keep trying. The world doesn't come as a present gift wrapped. Your life is not always going to be easy. There are trials and tribulations, but we're stronger and we succeed because of that strength. And so this is a wonderful university, a great place for such a conference to happen. And I am filled with hope that today is the beginning of many more collaborations, many great ideas, and many solutions to the problems that confront us. So thank you very much for choosing Carleton, and congratulations to the organizers and to every one of you for getting up early. Thank you.
Many thanks, Roseann, Professor Runte. I now delighted to bring to the stage my colleague, Her Excellency Dr. Mathabo, Tsepa, the High Commissioner from Lesotho.
Thank you, Professor Blair, for those kind words. Thank you very much, Dr. Roseann Runte, for welcoming us into your beautiful campus. And in fact, one of Canada's academically distinguished institution of higher learning and research, the Carleton University. Honorable Lois Brown, Member of Parliament for Newmarket, Ottawa, and Parliament Secretary to the Minister of International Development, Ms. Patricia Malikai, Director General Pan-Africa Bureau, Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, and all the staff of DFED present here. Honorable Susan Makawaki, Member of Parliament for East Africa Legislative Assembly, the Vice Dean of African Diplomatic Corps, Your Excellency Solomon Asonde, High Commissioner of Cameroon to Canada, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners and colleagues, all members of the Diplomatic Corps present here, our eminent speakers, some of whom come from as far as Africa and the United Kingdom, members of the African diaspora, all friends of Africa present with us today, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. While the thank you remarks will be done during the closing session of this conference, I want to recognize that this conference would have not been possible had it not been for the financial and the in-kind contribution of the African Diplomatic Corps, the African Women Diplomatic Forum, AUDIF, and the Carleton University with all its departments. I also want to recognize that the success of this conference lies in the hard work that was put behind the scene by the technical team of the African Diplomatic Corps, the students at Carleton, and their professors who worked tirelessly to put together all that was necessary for this conference to take place. Thank you very much, and I would like us to give them a round of applause. It is both a pleasure and honor to welcome you to the African Union Agenda 2063, Assessing the Development Vision for Africa Conference, held at Carleton University in Canada's capital, Ottawa, on this day of March 12, 2015. In 2013, Africa celebrated the 50th anniversary of the formation of the African Union. As part of the celebration, the heads of state and government of the African Union pledged their commitment to make progress in 8 key areas toward Development Agenda 2063. These include establishing agendas for social economic development, revitalizing African identity and resonance, implementing continental free trade areas, promoting economic empowerment of women and youth, as well as peace and security and democratic governance. It is very befitting that the organizers of the African Union Agenda 2063 have scheduled this conference to take place during the month of March. 4 days ago, on March 8, 2015, the world commemorated International Women's Day. And here in Ottawa, through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Development, and through its very able leadership of the Chief of Protocol and the Women Association of Ottawa, all the heads of missions and diplomatic corps had the privilege of celebrating the International Women's Day. Yet, there is another reason for African women, women worldwide, friends of Africa and partners, to celebrate women throughout the year 2015 and beyond, in order to speed up the implementation of public and private policies that promote gender equality. Heads of state and government of the African Union have declared 2015 as the year of women's empowerment and development towards Africa's Agenda 2063. We cannot talk of participatory, inclusive, and sustainable development without empowering African women and African youth, who constitute more than 50% of African population. The goal of this conference is to discuss, assess, and analyze the African Union Agenda 2063, the African Diplomatic Corps, the African Women Diplomatic Forum, and the Institute of African Studies of Carleton University have organized this conference with the main objectives to share thoughts, experiences, and to reflect upon what is this African Union Agenda 2063, to stimulate discussions on the themes and features of the African Union Agenda 2063, and to assess the development process of this agenda. In order to achieve these objectives, the organizers have structured the conference into 2 parts. Part 1 comprised the opening session and the keynote. In the opening session titled Improving Lives, a Global Imperative, Honorable Member of Parliament Lois will share thoughts and experiences on the important role played by the government of Canada to improve lives in Africa, particularly lives of women and children. Our keynote speaker, His Excellency Dr. Sulley, the High Commissioner of Ghana to Canada, will provide us a background to the Agenda 2063. And I must say, Dr. Gariba is also son-in-law of the Kingdom of Lesotho because he married a beautiful Lesotho woman.
Wow.
Part 2 of the conference consists of 3 panels. These panels are based on the 8 themes of the Africa Union Agenda 2063. And panel 1 will be sustainable development. Thank you. Panel 1 will focus on sustainable development, governance, and leadership. Part 2 on women and Africa's transformation agenda. And part 3 on empowering youth, cultural heritage, values, and ethics. I hope that you will learn and share experiences during this one-day conference. I welcome all of you and look forward to a very productive day of deliberations. Welcome and thank you.
Many thanks to both Dr. Tsepa and Dr. Runte for welcoming and officially opening the conference. And now I'm delighted to call up Honourable Lois Brown, who's the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for International Development, who's going to give us the first substantive talk for this morning. Thank you.
Possible to move the computer just for notes. Thank you. Just makes it a little bit easier. Thank you so much. Well, good morning. Delighted to be here with all of you, and thank you so much, High Commissioner, for the invitation to share some of this day with you. It looks like it's going to be extraordinary, and I think you're going to have some very robust discussions about how we can see Africa move forward in these next 50 years. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I want you to know that the suit that I am wearing this morning, I had made for me in Benin. I was there with a delegation and saw some of the haute couture that the designer had made, and I ordered a suit which arrived in my office 3 months later, according to plan, and I am thrilled to be wearing it today. But I am very delighted to be here with you this morning, particularly to share with you some of the vision that Canada has for improving the lives of women and children. And I'm really sorry that I'm not able to stay here for the whole day, because it does sound like this is going to be a very interesting discussion. I looked at the agenda, but unfortunately, I am required at committee this morning very shortly. Interestingly enough, we are pursuing a study on the protection of children globally, but we have focused much of our attention on protecting children in Africa, and I look forward to the discussion from our witnesses today. I'd also like to say that I bring you greetings on behalf of the Honourable Christian Paradis, our Minister of International Development, who sends his very best wishes for a successful conference. I want to begin with 2 stories. And I would like to say I apologize to the women of the Diplomatic Corps who heard these stories recently. I recognize that I'm being repetitious, but I do believe that these stories paint a picture. 18 months ago, I was asked by our Prime Minister to attend the inauguration of the new president in Mali. I arrived on a Tuesday night at midnight, and I was on the ground for all of 48 hours, departing on the midnight flight on Thursday night. And as you would understand, Thursday was completely taken up with the inauguration ceremonies. We were in the arena from 8:30 until long after 2 o'clock, when there was a dinner put on for dignitaries, which I had the opportunity to attend. However, Wednesday, when I arose early, I had the opportunity to visit some of the projects that Canada has been investing in Bamako. I visited a maternity ward in a hospital where I held in my hands a baby girl. This baby girl was 4 hours old. She was 3 months premature, and she weighed only 4 pounds. Her mom was just 16 years of age. Not a hopeful story. Not a hopeful story. She was somebody's daughter, and that was somebody's granddaughter. But I'm pleased to tell you that that mom and that baby are alive today because of Canada's focus on maternal, newborn, and child health. A frontline healthcare worker out in the village recognized a very challenging pregnancy and got that young girl into medical assistance in a hospital that had medical equipment, a hospital that had medical expertise, micronutrients for that baby to thrive, and the kinds of immunizations to keep her from getting sick with terrible diseases. And another story. In Malawi, 45 miles east of Lilongwe, I visited a hospital where I saw the evidence of children suffering from stunting. Malawi has lots and lots of corn. You know, corn may fill empty tummies, but it certainly doesn't provide the nutrients that little ones need to grow and thrive. I saw children who, at the age of 5 years old, had an upper arm about this big around. However, I also saw hope there, because I witnessed a Canadian project, the Micronutrient Initiative, these magic sachets of micronutrients being sprinkled on the food that these little ones were going to receive, to be able to grow and to thrive, to grow physically, as they desperately needed to do, but to thrive intellectually and to be able to achieve their full academic potential. You know, in 2010, a review of the Millennium Development Goals demonstrated that the world was seriously falling behind in its commitment to reduce child and maternal mortality in the world's poorest countries. At the time, nearly 350,000 women died during pregnancy and childbirth every year, and more than 8 million children died before their 5th birthday. What is most tragic about these deaths were that they were largely preventable, and the keys to saving their lives often no more sophisticated than providing nutritious food, clean water, basic medical care, and simple immunizations. So, how could Canada stand idly by while women and children died from preventable causes? As the host of the G8, G20 meetings in 2010, our Prime Minister boldly put maternal, newborn, and child health on the agenda. And so was born the Muskoka Initiative. Prime Minister Harper led by example and declared that Canada would support this initiative with $2.85 billion for the 2010 to 2015 timeframe. And his leadership was met with overwhelming support from other donor countries, private sector contributions, and foundations. And $2.85 billion was leveraged to some $7.3 billion. This groundswell of global action and support translated into tremendous results for millions of women and millions of children. And today, maternal mortality rates are declining, and millions more children are celebrating their 5th birthday. I always like to say they're seeing 5 candles on their birthday cake. And isn't that a hopeful wish that every child would have a 5th birthday cake. But my friends, despite this progress, significant gaps do remain. Improvements have been slowest in most parts of sub-Saharan Africa and almost non-existent in many conflict-afflicted states. And so, building on this incredible legacy of the Muskoka Initiative, Prime Minister Harper once again called the world to action. And last May, Prime Minister Harper hosted a summit in Toronto called Saving Every Woman, Saving Every Child Within Arm's Reach. The summit brought together some of the world's most eminent global health leaders, including UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, World Bank President Jim Kim, Queen Rania of Jordan, President Kikwete of Tanzania, with whom Prime Minister Harper had shared co-chair of the Muskoka Initiative, Margaret Chen from the World Food Program, and Melinda Gates of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they unanimously agreed that we must accelerate our efforts if we want to reach women and children in every corner of the globe. And at that summit, Prime Minister Harper announced for the period 2015 to 2020, Canada would make a contribution of $3.5 billion to lead the way with a clear focus on 3 objectives: nutrition, immunization, and vital statistics. And it is our hope, my friends, that we would see that money leveraged in the same way that we saw $2.85 billion become $7.3. That if this 3.5 could become $10.5 billion, we will have the resources we need to make an incredible difference. But this is not just a monetary commitment. This was our Prime Minister's message to the world, that our government, with the full weight of the country of Canada standing behind us, was in this for the long haul. And he echoed this message at the UN General Assembly last September. Oh, he acknowledged that there were numerous problems that the world rightly deserves our attention for, but he emphasized that Canada believes in focusing on issues that can, and I'm going to quote him, truly transform the world. We know that addressing the issues of maternal, newborn, and child health can truly transform the world. And Prime Minister Harper urged the General Assembly to ensure that maternal, newborn, and child health remains a top priority for the post-2015 development agenda. This is how strongly he believes in the work that has already been done. But he also believes that there are other initiatives, more initiatives, that can save more lives. He joined representatives from the United States, Norway, and the World Bank Group to launch the Global Financing Facility in support of Every Woman, Every Child. And the aim of this facility is to sustainably finance maternal, newborn, and child health with a wide range of financing instruments and partners, including international organizations, other donors, developing countries, and the private sector. The facility will also emphasize strengthening civil registration and vital statistics in developing countries. This data will provide real-time information, including births and deaths, information vital for policymakers to design effective and responsive policies, programs, health services, education, and economic growth. And I was very pleased to hear Dr. Runte say that we need the collaboration of all aspects of academia, business. We need the private sector in there, because it's only by that kind of collaboration that we are going to come up with the kinds of ideas that are going to make changes. We hope to see many more multi-stakeholder initiatives like this in the future. And I could tell you so much more about what Canada is doing, like our pledge 15 months ago of $650 million to the Global Fund to combat HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. I just had dinner with Dr. Christophe Ben the other night and Sven Robinson, who were here from the Global Fund in Geneva, talking about the enormous results that they have seen in the last 5 years and again saying that it is not time for us to take our foot off the accelerator. Now is the time to reinforce the commitment and to do even more to see some of these diseases eliminated in the next 5 to 10 years. I'd like to talk about our recent announcement of $500 million to Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. And as I said, out of this $350 million that we have announced, or $3.5 billion that we announced for the next tranche for maternal, newborn, and child health, we know that immunization is going to have to be a huge part of that. But look at the success that we've had working with our partnership with Rotary International to eradicate the terrible disease of polio. Friends, we are this close to seeing polio eradicated. We've got a few places where there have been some eruptions, and we're concerned about those, and we are going to work on those ones. But isn't it wonderful to think that children of the future are not ever going to have to face this terrible, terrible disability that children of the past have had. And it is such an exciting story that Canada is very proud to be part of. I'd also just like to mention our support for Grand Challenges Canada, an organization that seeds new ideas and scales up innovative solutions to global health problems. And we see some great ideas coming out of our academic institutions. We have seen scientists come forward with ideas that we know are going to make enormous changes for very, very small amounts of money. Or Canada's support for the Zinc Alliance for Child Health, delivering zinc supplements and oral rehydration salts to treat diarrhea, one of the most common killers of children in developing countries. And there are so many other initiatives. But I have one more story, and it's why I am so committed. It's why I'm so committed personally to saving the lives of mums and babies. And this is a romance story. It's a story of a young man named Kofi Asante, who came from Ghana to study in Canada as a foreign student. And of all places to go to, he went to Laurentian University. He arrived here with a master's degree in physics, and at Laurentian he completed a second master's degree in material sciences and nanotechnologies. And then he went to the United States, where he completed his doctorate in electrical engineering. However, while he was at Laurentian University, he met a young lady by the name of Shannon. And while Kofi was in the United States doing his doctorate, Shannon was off in Australia doing her master's degree in education, and unbeknownst to us, there was a romance brewing. And yes, indeed, Dr. Kofi Asante is my son-in-law. And so you see, my friends, Africa is my family, and it's my future. And so, one more story. Last year, when Shannon was teaching in Takwa in Ghana, she was teaching a grade 4 and 5 English students. Her smallest class was 37 kids, just so you know. The teachers here in North America have no idea. But she used letter writing as one of the composition projects, an exercise for the kids. And she had the students in her class write to the children of the class that she had taught before she left for Africa. And she shared one of those letters with me from a girl by the name of Anna, who wrote, and I quote Anna, "I am so glad to be in school because I want to be somebody in the future." And friends, that's what we're doing. We're creating somebodies. Somebodies who will have moms who survive childbirth. Somebodies who will grow and thrive because of good nutrition and because of immunization. And somebodies who are going to one day lead the world. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Canada wants to remain part of this agenda. Canada will be there. And if there is anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Lois. It's always wonderful to get a representative of the Canadian government to speak at a conference, but someone with such passion and strong ties to the continent of Africa is rare, and we greatly appreciate your supportive and encouraging words. I now want to introduce our keynote speech, His Excellency Dr. Sulley Gariba. Dr. Tsepa had mentioned Sulley is a son-in-law to her, given that he married a Lesotho. Similar to a story which Lois just told, I believe Sulley met Neil, his wife, here at Carleton University. So we're very pleased that Sulley has returned to represent Ghana to Canada, and I know we're all delighted to have him here, including his PhD supervisor, my colleague and friend, Professor Linda Freeman, who is here. So I now turn it over to Sulley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Blair, and it is quite intimidating for you to already let me know that my PhD supervisor is in the room. Because now I start to wonder, how to calibrate my notes. And really my first story is about that PhD supervisor. When I first presented my first draft, it was in the winter of 1986, around about December. And when I received the transcripts back, they were buried throughout the winter because they had been so massacred that I wondered if I would ever get out of this program. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to skip diplomatic niceties, especially because I'm back on campus at Carleton University and speaking in front of an audience that is not only academic, but full of PhD supervisors. Therefore, I'm going to try to not be that diplomatic. Pardon me, my mother-in-law. But I wanted to situate this presentation in the context of a critical debate about Africa's development agenda that we're going to deal with as Agenda 2016. And in the brief time I have, to basically give a reflection of the past, but also underscore the importance of how the past has influenced what today we're describing as Agenda 2063. Lois has eloquently given us the rendition of how a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a little romance. And not only am I witness to it, she is as well, and many others in this room. About 58 years ago, precisely this very month, in March of 1957, the first African country south of the Sahara, Ghana, gained its independence. And at that time, its first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said, and I quote, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked to the total liberation of all of Africa." That was the beginning of the first 50-year vision enunciated by Africa, led by Africans. When in 1963, the OAU, now African Union, was founded, this vision was eloquently reaffirmed, and there were practical steps put in place to implement what has now become the first 50-year vision of Africa. Today, as we speak, every inch of African soil is liberated. The fulfillment of that agenda has become a reality for millions of Africans. Many more African countries are becoming democratic, and in fact, the majority of African people now live in countries that are ruled democratically. Elections are happening in the dozens, and more than a dozen African countries are in the top list of best economic performing countries, as are witnessing sometimes double-digit growth in an era in this world where hardly 1% growth is considered credible. Madam High Commissioner, who is the main convener of this, in the few minutes I have, I want to be able to articulate some of the contours of what is now being described as Agenda 2063, as this is the subject of our conference today. The agenda is both aspirational and inspirational, but at the same time, bellies some of the critiques of Africa's own past. So while the agenda sets out 7 critical principles that will govern what would become the next 50 years of Africa's transformation, it also underscores fundamental critiques of how the process of development has evolved over the last 50 years. So you may read it as platitudes, but if you look deeper into it, you also see internal contradictions. First one, those who've read it may not find this as the first one, but I chose to put it first. An Africa where development is people-driven, unleashing the potential of women and youth. I put it first because, as amply demonstrated by this conference has been convened and is being steered under the leadership of the African Women Diplomatic Forum. And this underscores the significance of women's leadership as they delve into the collective vision that was put forward by the African Union. But it also, this particular aspiration as part of Agenda 2063, then seems to suggest to us that in the past, development in Africa has not always been people-driven, and it most certainly has marginalized women, and in particular the youth. Because you have to put forward an aspirational vision in the context of something that you also want to correct. And when you look into this as you deliberate throughout the day, it is important to look at the past with trepidation, but at the same time, to project into the future what you want to do. Second principle, Africa as a strong, united, and influential global player and partner. Very significant. Again, manifested in this conference, as we have heard from Honorable Lois Brown, the incremental growth of Africa's collective voices, both within and outside the continent, but at the same time, partnering with many international organizations for the collective realization of a public good, such as improving lives of women and children, and especially focusing on some of the debilitating diseases that have hindered development. But at the same time, as we look at this aspirational vision, we need to cast our minds back of quite recent prevailing paradigm in which Africa has not been thought of as a partner, where Africa has constantly been referred to more or less as a basket case, constantly needing aid, where decisions are made for Africa by institutions and organizations who are not always right. So we're going into an era where partnership is governing our relationship with Africa, with the world, but that has not always been the case. So this aspirational vision is not only a recognition of the limitations of the role that Africa played in global relations, but a cry out to suggest that in fact the continent that was seen as one constantly requiring aid and humanitarian assistance is becoming of age, is more democratic, is affirming its fundamental principles that are akin to the values that successful nations ascribe to, and is ready to do business. Yes, do it in the context of trade and investment, but at the same time, mind the common good, as Prime Minister Harper has convened with many other African leaders, focusing on the public good that will assist African countries to uplift themselves, but ultimately will rid the world of some of the things that inhibit development. Third principle, a prosperous Africa based on inclusive and sustainable development, inclusive growth and sustainable development. Fundamental to this principle is a bigger critique of the manner in which Africa's resources have been plundered, not the least by African states themselves, but aided and abetted by several multinational corporations whose investments we often tout as being positive and increasingly are becoming so, but need to be subjected to much larger global principles of probity, accountability, and sustainable development. Africa is rich in natural resources, but the last 50 years for many countries has been a tragedy of wealth. A wealth often buried in the belly of the earth in extractive resources that have generated some of the most atrocious conflicts that the world has known. How wealthy can you be if the wealth actually creates misery? And so this aspirational vision, not only is it pointing towards the values that we need to aspire to in the next 50 years, it is also questioning the caliber and the character and credibility of the development approaches that we have adopted. So it is important for all facets of society, civil society, governments, international partners, to take this vision seriously, that the type of development that Africa now seeks to have frowns at the earlier paradigm where it was simply plunder and, as we call it, say it in Africa, divide and rule. It is one of a prosperous Africa, but one which also allows it to generate sustainable development, not just for the present generation, but especially for future generations. And that this is consistent with the global worldview as well. So it's not just about Africa, that the depletion of resources that are not renewed must in fact affect countries like Canada and other countries of the world, because ultimately the quantum of resources that this earth has is there for us all to share. And that is not simply a locational matter. Number 4, an integrated continent, politically united and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism. This is so fundamental precisely because a lot of the earlier independent states invested substantial resources in the achievement of the first 50 years vision of a total liberation of Africa. Tanzania, Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria, and many other forerunners in the independence struggle left their doors and resources wide open to allow the later comers in the liberation struggle to get in. And this principle, this core value of a united Pan-Africanist continent is an essential critique for us in Africa to begin to think harder about how the liberation process of the last 50 years occurred and what we need to do to be more inclusive of our countries. In many, many instances now, in Africa, where other nationalities are shut out of borders, as countries have become so balkanized that we are all looking at our own internal affairs and not mindful of the history of the last 50 years. At a time where some of us were still under colonial rule or under apartheid or any other form of subjugation, that the resources, the commitments, the eloquence of the Pan-Africanist agenda, including Africa in the diaspora, contributed for the total liberation. And therefore this vision, this principle is key for us to internalize as Africans as we move towards the next 50 years. Peace and security are critical in that we are now witnessing major threats to the global security agenda. Not only is terrorism a menacing phenomenon in many countries, including Canada, in Africa, it is even more menacing than many might even admit. The peace and security of our boundaries, of our citizens, is critical. When hundreds of girls are abducted in Nigeria, the world woke up to the realization that terrorism, wherever it occurs, affects humanity, and it affects especially the poor, in that the people who are already dispossessed are now subjected to terrorism. So peace and security is critical, and hence this agenda item. And finally, an Africa with strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values, and ethics. It is so critical when you stand on a platform or in the corridors of the cafeteria and say, I'm an African. I'm an African because there are values and ethics, values of family, of companionship, of community, that are still very much dear to the hearts of most Africans. To that extent, bringing it front and center into the wider continental vision is important because it sets Africans apart. It allows the culture of sharing and of managing collective resources. And these are values which sadly are being eroded by some autocratic states. These are values which are being denigrated by large corrupt enterprises which have to be checked. So I have gone at length to characterize the contours of Agenda 2063, not just as a set of feel-good aspirations, but a set of principles that embelly some of the inner core of the critique of how we have not done development the right way. So it is not enough to pontificate about how inspiring this vision is without delving into some of our own internal challenges. Let me just enumerate a few of them, just as pointers as you go into your discussions. Economic growth is happening, yes, and I have myself said that several African countries are growing double digits. But this growth, we must admit, is not benefiting the majority of our citizens. Part of the problem, as I indicated, is corruption. And this problem, while manifest in Africa, is indeed a global phenomenon that is aided and abetted by a complex global network of actors, including money laundering and related vices. We must all address this. We must address it internally, and throughout Africa, we hear citizens' voices now being raised loudly about the phenomenon of corruption, and citizens are taking fearless actions to curb this. Democracy is spreading, as manifested by many elections, but the dividends of freer societies are not translating into jobs and livelihood opportunities for the majority, especially women and youth. So what is the benefit of casting your ballot once every 4 years on the basis of promises that are made to you as citizens in futility? So yes, elections are happening, constitutional rule is occurring, but the extent to which citizens are participating in the political process in a manner that allows them to influence the choices of decisions, of resource allocation, that allocates substantial resources to the largest section of the population which are dispossessed, is much limited. We need to find different formula of democracy, of the expansion of citizens' rights that go beyond elections. In my own country, we're making substantial effort at decentralizing power and authority further, of ensuring that not only do elections happen at the central level, but that they do happen at decentralized levels. So that citizens increasingly gain access to decision making, and in particular to resource allocation. Because decision making is meaningless unless it is grounded in the ability of citizens to influence how their tax cedis or dollars are spent on the issues that matter most. Africa's natural resources are fueling ever-increasing records of GDP expansion, but their exploitation does not appear to be leading to rapid expansion of the infrastructure and the facilities that would create sustainable accelerated growth. So it's quite ironical. And sometimes I ponder, even in my own country, that when I go to the mining areas, you see large mines, but there are no roads leading to the mines. They invest more and more in heavy-duty machinery and trucks whose sole purpose is to haul out the ore. And all they do because they bring the ore out in boulders, intending not to process them in Ghana. And those boulders are simply shipped out. And this is happening in country after country. So sometimes it might well be that it is safer to leave the resources in the belly of the earth than to exploit them. But their exploitation is what seems to be suggesting that our GDP, our economic growth is in double digit. In my own country, Ghana, we projected to become a middle income country by 2020. That was our vision. Guess what? We became middle income in 2010. 10 years before our own vision. It must be remarkable that a country can achieve its vision 10 years before it projected it. What's the reason? All of a sudden in 2009, 2010, we became an oil producing country, an oil exporting country. And the statistic of oil suddenly pushed us to achieve our GDP per capita projection for middle income 10 years earlier. Now guess what? We only have a 10% stake in that new oil find. And so, really, for all intents and purposes, that whole shoot up in our GDP per capita doesn't make any sense for the ordinary farmer in my village. These are imbalances that hopefully Agenda 2063 must begin to address if it is truly to become an Africa-owned and Africa-centered agenda. Such are the huge discrepancies and challenges confronting Africa that a thorough stock-taking occurred when Vision 2063 was being formulated, but must begin to be interrogated even further. And this is why I wish to congratulate the African Women Diplomatic Forum, the Carleton University, and other stakeholders who have put up this conference. It's rare in itself for the diplomatic community to open up to self-critique as a means of enriching what we collectively aspire to do. This is the new Africa. This is the face, or these are the faces of the new diplomats. And this is why we have come to Carleton University to engage ourselves in the kind of dialogue and to invite our partners to launch research activities that will help us take apart this agenda so that we can reconstruct Africa's vision for the next 50 years and hopefully to make it a transformative vision rather than simply a vision and futility. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Dr. Gariba. I'll have to ask my colleague Linda to see if you passed the exam, but I believe with flying colours you did. We're running a bit late, so we have, I'm hoping, haven't checked, I'm hoping coffee and muffins and tea are outside. Maybe we'll try to have it for about 25 minutes and start back by 20 to 11 for panel 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Deputy Dean, I think